life. And for many years he headed up a similar group in Ephrata. When he got active in coming to Mt Gretna again, he came there as a summer as a young kid, but when he got active again, he said Mt Gretna needs a historical society. And so he sort of spearheaded us in getting our historical society organized, getting our museum and our collections going. So our community owes a great deal of gratitude toward Fred Buch for what he has done for Mt Gretna. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jack. There are people here tonight who could speak on this subject of our Chautauqua and Mt Gretna as a whole. And I'm sure there's some people here that could correct me in some of the things if I speak out of order. I'm going to preface our display here of history by just giving you a little bit of background which is not covered in our presentation with the video. As you heard on this wonderful DVD, when this came out, I said we've got to have that. And I twisted the arm of the Chautauqua Board of Managers to buy it because as most historical societies, we don't have too much money. So we house this in tape in the Historical Society, but it is the property of the Chautauqua. As you may have heard on here, when this New York Chautauqua got started, it was basically the Chautauqua Lake Sunday School Assembly. And they were, it's 1874 when they began, it was basically a place to teach Sunday school teachers how to teach their students in church. And by 1878, it became what it started to become what it is today, in that it wasn't just religion, but it was science, and it was art, and it was music, and recreation, and so forth. Now you can imagine what it was like traveling from Lebanon or Lancaster to Chautauqua, New York in the 1870s on a train powered by coal and steam, with a lot of soot flying back into your face in the summertime when the windows of the cars were open. And it was quite a distance. And so this opened up to breed daughter Chautauquas. And the Chautauqua in Mt Gretna got started by a lot of pastors from Lebanon, Lancaster, as far as Reading, York, even down into Montgomery County, that got interested in forming this Chautauqua. How do you begin something like this? Well, they came up with, what did I do with that file folder? I have it here somewhere. Oh, I don't do that. Can't see tonight. But these gentlemen got together and decided that they needed a form, an organization that could primarily, and this was one of the primary reasons that the Pennsylvania Chautauqua got started here, was to teach pastors in their vocation and to try to get them to refresh their Greek and their Hebrew, which they didn't have time to do as they were pastoring. And most of these pastors could not afford a vacation. And so this would be a vacation spot that they could relax and enjoy the nature and the mountains and the trees and the quiet of Mount Gretna. Now, originally, when this was formed, they took this little magazine, or as it was, this one is 18 pages long, but I just have about 7 pages here. I'm going to pass this around that you can take a look at it. This is what was the beginning of the Chautauqua, and it was called the Christian Culture, official organ of the Pennsylvania Chautauqua. Max Hart, who was the Moravian pastor in Lebanon, and later president of the Moravian Seminary, was, along with Reverend George Stewart and Theodore Schmock. Theodore Schmock was the Lutheran pastor at Salem in Lebanon. His daughter actually built the cottage that I now own. She was a maiden lady, but she adopted a brother and sister. And one day the sister came up to my cottage when we first purchased it and were remodeling it, and my cousin was there doing some work, and he said, "You need to come back on a Sunday when Fred's here." She did, and I got first-hand information on who built the cottage, how it was built, and how they enjoyed it, and what they did when they lived there. So that was Theodore Schmock. Then they got a fellow by the name of H.B. Cochran, who was the publisher. What they did is they made sure that this publication would be in the hands of all the churches in the areas around Lebanon, Lancaster, York, Berks counties, and encourage them to get involved with this Christian culture, which was built on the pillars of the New York Chautauqua. In other words, they wanted people to be interested in the arts, in the sciences, in the theater programs, and in religion and recreation. And they felt recreation was extremely important, that people just didn't sit around and do nothing, but that they would become educated in how they should participate in recreation, wholesome recreation. By getting this into the hands of the churches and publishing this very inexpensively, they were able to get a group of people together that were interested in forming this unit. The one that I have here that I'll pass around is April 1892. This was started about 2-3 years prior to 1892 as a preview of things to come. Got people excited. By January of 1892, after first coming to Gretna in 1891 to look at the place, talk to Coleman about where they may have their piece of land, they decided that they would form this. And by April of 1892, there was nothing there. The whole town of Mt Gretna was known as Mt Gretna Park. Even though the park was on the other side of 117, the whole thing was known as the park. They leased the land initially from the Colemans. They did not own it. And Robert Coleman promised that he would put water and sewer and provide all kinds of other amenities for their use. As many of you may know, or some of you may not know, by 1893, Coleman was gone, never came back. He invested heavily in the railroads in Florida. He was really very taken by railroads. He invested in these railroads and lost a lot of money in Florida railroads, and basically lost his fortune. He wasn't bankrupt, but he lost his fortune. When this first opened in 1892 in July, from April to July, there must have been, I don't know how many contractors in Mt Gretna, because they built what they called the music hall or the auditorium, which would have been the present location of the playhouse. In order to be called a Chautauqua, they had to have that auditorium. They had to have a place for people to stay. They constructed a women's dormitory, a man's dormitory. They constructed cottages of 2 rooms and 4 rooms, 2-story cottages. And you could even rent one for the whole season for $35. And there, they will say in this document here that they wanted to keep the price as low as possible, that everyone could afford to come to the Chautauqua in Mt Gretna. They were able to also construct a dining hall. A hotel came a little bit later in 98, but remember, there were no kitchens in these cottages. There were no bathrooms in these cottages, and they had a problem. By 1898, what do we do if our wells become contaminated because of the sewage? And all they had were these little outhouses. And so they built a big brick pit in the ground, and then built a bathroom facility over top of that. And inside, underneath each hole, they put big copper kettles. I just envision them, I have no idea what they look like, but I envision them as large milk cans, only about that tall. And after the 2-week season was over, they'd take the lids off and hoist these things out and take them out to the farm. Now, they had over several thousand people. Pardon?
Took them out to the where?
The farmer's field. It got so bad that by 1910, even after they had sewer, the Chautauqua put a sewer system in 1898. It wasn't put in right. And so there was an area where the sewer would come in, and then there was a divider, and the sewer would go through these various stages and come around this way, and by that time it would be supposedly purified. It would go down and then it would exit. Somehow that middle section got taken out or was never installed, and so they were pumping raw sewage into the Chautauqua Creek. The government stepped in 1910 and said that the creek was not fit for man nor beast. Over in the park, they had 2 outhouses and nobody ever cleaned them. So people went out into the woods, never used them. And the park was also contaminated. So they had a lot of trials and tribulations. Because Mr. Robert Habersham Coleman did not follow through in his promises, they went to Dawson Coleman in Lebanon at the railroad company office and said, "We were promised this, we want it." And he said, "Where's your contract?" And all they had was a handshake from Mr. Coleman. So they said, "Sorry, You know, there's no money here to do it. The first board, major board of the Chautauqua resigned, and then it almost failed. Fortunately, a couple other men came to the rescue and pulled it out, and of course went through all these problems that I just described to you. But surely they were strong-headed, and they were going to make this thing happen no matter what. And thank goodness they did. We really all enjoy it today. So at the same time, the camp meeting came to Mt Gretna in 1892, and they had similar situations over there, only they didn't have the number of people. And the two of us have survived all these years together, and it's a great story on what they went through to give us what they have. And a lot of people don't realize what we really owe these people that initially started this. So we have these old postcards, which we'll show to you, to describe some of this. It also includes some of the camp meeting. A couple of years ago, a gentleman was doing some research, and I can't remember who he was working with, if it was the Hershey Company or the Hershey Schools, but he was writing a history on the Hershey family. Does anybody know who that might have been? He came down and did a lot of research in our library. He couldn't believe all the materials that we had, and he was looking into Milton Hershey's brothers and his parents, and he told me that Milton Hershey was very much interested in the Chautauqua movement. He was very much interested in the camp meeting movement, and of course the camp meeting movement was United Brethren, and the Chautauqua was primarily made up of Lutheran, Reformed, Moravian, and Episcopal. Those were the major players in the Chautauqua. So, we'll begin. Are there any questions about anything that I talked about? If not, we'll proceed with the...
You can have to change this one.
With the...
Just push down on that arrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is the Lake Chautauqua. It was never built for recreation or swimming. It was going to be standing in your way here. It was built to provide ice for refrigeration in the summer months. They would cut ice and store it in a warehouse. We put sawdust between the blocks so they wouldn't freeze together, and it was primarily used for that. What the girls would do, and we have some marvelous pictures, thanks to Mary Ellen, who's here, of her mother and some of the girls actually jumping off the ice piers in the summertime to swim. And of course later, then Coleman provided some canoes so that they could at least use those in the lake. And of course, at a later date, we were able to get there's the canoes, and then they built this little canoe shed over there. This is 117 out that direction. And, this is before the bathhouses were there.
Sir, could you face us when you speak?
Okay, I'm going to try to...
Give him a chair. Give him a chair.
Yeah, use a chair.
I probably will never get up. There you can see the closer look of that pier with the canoes.
Fred, we need you to face this way so we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, I see. You like the dresses in a hot summer? Now you're seeing Hotel Kanawha being built. You notice that the roof line, we have construction still going on. It was in 1898. By the way, by 1898, the railroad company got tired of hearing the Chautauqua people complaining, and so they actually sold the land instead of leasing the land. The way it was sold in the Chautauqua, the land was sold to the individual cottage owners, and they were deeded directly from the Robert Haversham Coleman and Ann Rogers, Ann Coleman Rogers, his sister, trust directly to the owners of the cottages. In the camp meeting, it was done differently. It was sold originally to the Camp Meeting Association, and they then divvied the land out, and they wanted a little more control over it. There you see the Hotel Kanawha as it was finished. I wish it were still there. It was a beautiful piece of architecture. Tennis courts down below. There you can see the canoes.
How long has it been on?
The hotel was torn down in 1940. By 1930, it had gone bankrupt. I hate to say this to you folks from Hershey, but by 1930 it had gone bankrupt, and the actual park also was not in the best condition. He said, because some character up the road by the name of Milton Hershey built a better hotel and a better park. Another view of the boating here. And next you're going to see the first bathhouse. This left a lot to be desired, but it was the first after they realized that people needed to swim in this lake and they wanted to get them off the ice piers. Does anybody not know who this girl is? There were 4 photographs taken of this girl in her bathing suit, and they made 4 postcards. When her father found out that she was on these postcards, he went to the photographer and demanded not only the postcards, but all the plates from which they were made. And of course reprimanded his daughter for posing for them. Isn't that amazing?
Who was she?
Who was she?
Remember her first name? I think it wasn't Lily. She was a Pontz, P-O-N-T-Z. Her father had a brickyard in Lancaster. We have a photograph in the museum of her parents sitting on the porch with the daughters down in the front. Well, father is very stern and mother has a very angry face. Don't you mess with my daughters. They all did marry, however. We've been in touch just last year. One of the granddaughters or great-granddaughters visited the Pontz cottage in the camp meeting. Pontz bought 2 cottages and hooked them together upstairs so you could go from one cottage to the other. I think mom and pop were in one cottage and the kids were in the other. That's how to take care of that. Now this little dock is right off of 117. I wish it were still there also. The Chautauqua owns the ground on that side of the lake and has use of the lake by Chautauqua cottage owners. And this was a neat little pier and almost like a gazebo there to run your books. Mr. Coleman was a real railroad nut, and this was his toy. The narrow gauge railroad ran from the Cornwall Lebanon Railroad in the park down to the lake, around the lake, over in front of the hotel, and then out to the rifle range, and then up to Governor Dick. And up at Governor Dick, the engine was detached. It went around a loop, came back and hooked onto the reverse side of the car, and then you flipped the seats for the return trip. Some of these are very similar, so list. Now, on this picture, you notice the chute, the slide, they called it the chute to chute. I wish that were there today. It would be a big liability, I'm afraid. Now you can see where the bathhouses were expanded. This one. There's a close-up of the hotel. Here's one of the stops of the narrow gauge railroad at the hotel. You can see the path leading down from the hotel to the train, and behind the engine you can see just a tiny bit of the lake. The next, you'll see the lake from the hotel porch. You can see down at the very bottom of the picture, it's the tennis court. And you can see the steps going down the hill to the train. Now these swimming suits were a bit more risque. A little bit later, I'm sure that Mr. Ponce would not have permitted his daughter to wear one. Now here's the new boat, the canoe boat or canoe dock. You can see there's a pier going out, and these canoes are scattered around the pier. The hotel's still there. And this one is the new pier. This pier I remember from the 40s. Any of you were down there at that time, I'm sure you do as well. There were benches along the pier as you walked out. Look at that nice blue water. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the man who ran the operation was Gene Otto. He always had a cigarette in his hand. And no matter what he was doing, whether it be dirty work or clean work, he always had a tie and a shirt on. Part of this building was Gremminger's Park Store. You could buy gasoline here. You could get your groceries there. And Breminger ran the park back in those days. The Ottos came later. Here's a different view of a different building. This is similar to the building that is there today. Been modified many, many times. See the gas pumps to the right, the old cars, and to the left you'll see a bus, and this is was the transportation from the various cottages or hotels to the train station. This is the Mt Gretna Fire Company. That was built in 1910. And this is it modified, and it became the Mt Gretna Library. At the corner of Pinch Road and of the camp meeting grounds. One of the activities that took place with the gentlemen and the men, I'm not sure if they were pitching quoits, I think is what they were doing there. Yeah, quoit. Now, once you got a kitchen, in which everybody did eventually, but I should tell you, before they had kitchens, if you didn't eat in a restaurant, they had various charcoal pits. I think there were 3 of them scattered around the Chautauqua. And the women would take their food over there and cook on the pits, and then take it back to their home. There was a lot of problems with that, because if you were baking a cake, you needed a different temperature than if you were making a steak or something, and they used to fight about intermingling temperatures in there.
Organized.
Here was your huckster, marketing. He would come around. Also, the iceman would come to your house. You didn't lock your doors, because the iceman would just walk right in, look in your refrigerator, see how much ice you needed. He would go out and cut the ice and the size that you needed and put it in your refrigerator, whether you were home or not. This is Pine Lodge, one of the nice cottages. If you notice how they treated the lower level under the porch, with these various designs of artistic wood working. And there is the tabernacle and the camp meeting. You know, in Mt Gretna, primarily the big, wonderful trees were chestnut trees. This camp meeting tabernacle, I think, sets on 24 chestnut posts. And the difference between that and the old playhouse was that the Chautauqua had 28 chestnut posts. But this looks very much similar today as it did then. This was shuffleboard along the main street, 117. This was the entrance to the Chautauqua grounds. This, like New York Chautauqua Institute, was at one time a gated community. John Silly, who built the playhouse or the auditorium, built that beautiful house that sits right aside of it. And he got so provoked because when he wanted to get into the Chautauqua grounds on Saturday night after midnight, everything was locked down and he couldn't get in. The gates were closed until late Sunday afternoon. You couldn't have any horses or motor vehicles on the grounds during that time. So he decided, the heck with this, and he went and built his own cottage over in the camp meeting. Here you can see part of the gate right aside of the post office. The two pillars that were there, and we could gate that. Post office hasn't changed much. It's been lifted up and moved around a little bit, but look at the muddy ground in the front there. Here's a later view. Now you can see there was a store in the front. I think they sold postcards and magazines and things like that. And here still is another view of it later on with the store in the front. You see the posts with the cars coming through have been narrowed down. This was Jack Bittner's house. On this site was the men's dormitory at one time. Now I must tell you that in those days, the Chautauqua was very racist in Pennsylvania. You had to be white Protestant to get in there. And we have a court case in our files of a family who was evicted when they rented a cottage. It was a Jewish family that rented a cottage on Princeton Avenue, and when the powers that be found out, they sent a notice and said that by Monday morning they had to be out of there. They're going to shut the water off. The man sued them. In those days, the judges didn't care either, so they said this was a frivolous case and threw it out. And I understand today the grandson of that individual is one of the best supporters of Gretna music. This is Pinch Road. If you come down Pinch Road, you don't see it like this anymore. The old muddy road. And there was this house on the right side that is no longer there. It's up in the upper areas. There's the Playhouse in A.E. Scott's day. And then we have the Chautauqua Hotel. This was built in several sections. They started building it in 1898, and then it was added to over the years, and in 1970 they tore it down. This thing was slapped up, as many of the cottages were, and after a while they just got weary and were about ready to fall over. The cottage that the Historical Society has now, we actually jacked it up in the air about 15 feet and built a basement under it. But when I crawled under there originally, it was held up by sandstones and cement blocks. And when you'd walk across the floor, it would shake like you were on almost like on one of those belts in a fun house. Now here's another cottage, and look at this woodwork under the porch. It's really beautiful. And a nice old car down there. There was an old lady that came and stayed at the inn, and she drove her car up from Philadelphia every year, and she would always park it between two trees so that no one would scuff her car by getting up against with another vehicle. What she didn't realize was that trees grow. And one year she got caught between the two trees. Here's the front of the inn with the main entrance. And all the ladies sitting on the porch. Inside the inn, we had the lobby. It was very nicely fit out. We had a nice fireplace in there, which is coming up. And a desk for you to sit and write postcards to your relatives at home saying, "Wish you were here." And the dining room. Now we have the menus for the dining room in the 40s, and their special was chicken dinner, complete dinner including dessert and drink for $2.50, and you could get a shot of whiskey for 50 cents. Double shot was $1.75. Now here's the main entrance into the Chautauqua grounds. If you look to the left, that is the Chautauqua Literary and Scientific Circle. And that's what the New York was called. And you had to have one of those or you were not a Chautauqua. The Jigger Shop is now to the right side, although that building there was sort of like a news agency, I guess. And you had to have a Hall of Philosophy. You saw that in New York. Before this building was there was a building, a two-story building. The first floor was classrooms. The second floor was like a little dormitory space, and the lower level was Sarah Tyson Rohr cooking school. Sarah Tyson Rohr was the steward of the late 1800s. She wrote for various magazines. She is the lady who encouraged the Corning Glass Company to make glass cookware. Very prominent lady, taught there in Mt Gretna, Chautauqua. Now we're over in the Heights. This is the Kaufman House Hotel. Mr. Kaufman had a store in the camp meeting, and he wanted to sell, I guess, and be active on Sundays, and so he built a store right outside of the camp meeting, and this was his hotel. Here's a better view of it. And another view of it. If you were at the Hideaway restaurant looking up, this is not far up the hill from looking at the side of the building. This is where Mr. Kaufman lived. And these little cottages that he built did not have kitchens in, but you could rent them. He wanted you to eat at his hotel. Today, they have been converted into houses, and we have a lady here tonight who lives in one of them. Oops. There's a better view of the cottages. That's, what is it, Holbox Street? And this is the dance pavilion, and they had movies That area also, the movie house, I guess, was to the right, and the dance pavilion sort of to the left. When the United Brethren bought that, they tore it down. No dancing. This is Mr. Kaufman's store. To the left is the entrance to the camp meeting. This is now part of the parking lot of the Mt. Gretna Fire Hall. The Mt. Gretna Historical Society has the banana split containers, beautiful banana split containers that you could buy your banana split in it. This, thanks to a lady who just donated them to us. This building is very close to the hideaway. It was a garage. One of the soldiers who trained here at Mt. Gretna married one of the local girls and operated this service station there. Now looking up the hill, the service station is on the left, and that's Kaufman's Hotel to the right. If you were standing in this building today, you would be in the Mt. Gretna United Methodist Church. It was a store, a little restaurant, and was converted into the United Methodist Church. Another view of the auditorium. Some of the planting outside. Here's the shuffleboard. Another view. I think this is the which cottage that is. Aha! There are the horses and wagons. You didn't park those on the street in Mt. Gretna. You had a special place to put them. Why? Fresh air. Here comes the narrow gauge railroad cars coming down from the park, and that bridge goes from the park over to the Soldiers Field.
Does anybody know where that engine is today?
Scrapped. They scrapped the engines. They burned the cars in the woods back in the park. They burned the cars. Thanks to Jack Pittner, we have some of the glass fragments of the clear story glass on the top. And we have on our front porch one of the seats from one of the cars. There's the fountain in the center of the park. If you walk up from the street side of the pizza shop and go back to the trails, you'll see that fountain setting there yet today. A lot of the buildings were still there in 2000. The carousel house was there, the roof collapsed, and that's gone now. There was a little place where Harpel sold his photographs and his postcards. And here's Mt. Gretna Park in the wintertime. There are the lovely chestnut trees that are no longer a part of our environment. And guess what those people are doing? They're picking chestnuts. This is the cafe in the park. Can you imagine today women with long dresses like this and men with coats and ties and straw hats coming to the park? Our kids today would have a fit. Here's the refreshment stand. You were permitted to bring your dog along, as you can see. And the little girls were dressed out with their long stockings. The ladies had their long skirts. I think to the right is the carousel house. I'm not sure, but it looks a little like it. But for a better view of the carousel house, here it is. After the carousel was in 1926, they put another carousel there. They took the horses off of there and make rocking horses for the kids in the park.
What year did the carousel stop being?
I don't know. Do you know when the park closed, Mary Helen? Somewhere in the 30s or 40s, I think.
I think I was there. I was born in 37, and I think I was at that one. My parents used to take me to different parks, but I think that's one that I was at.
We have a couple mysteries to solve. Jack Bittner always claimed that the carousel organ that we have in the museum came from that carousel in 1926. A gentleman just came back to Mt Gretna from Maine after 60 years of absence, and he literally said he wanted to die in Mt Gretna, and he did. I had the opportunity to talk to him before he passed away and question him on a lot of these things, and he said the carousel organ was in the carousel, and he went in with the rest of the kids and they took pipes out of it and destroyed it. So the carousel organ was taken out of this building. This was the forerunner of the Pennsylvania Farm Show. I can't tell you offhand what the original name for it was, but it was something like the Industrial, Mechanical, Agricultural, something or other facility, and every summer they would bring all the equipment that you would see for agriculture and display it in that building. Jack Bittner found this is now the skating rink. It's the oldest building in Mt Gretna. The skating rink is in there now, and in the lower level, Jack Bittner found this carousel organ. He always prided himself in saying that he stole it. Piece by piece, he removed it. He restored it, and when he had it restored, he went to the owner, Gene Otto, and said he stole it. And Gene said, that's fine, as long as it remains in Gretna for the people to enjoy. Did you know that the trolley car ran on the railroad tracks into Mt Gretna? Robert Haversham Coleman was a very ingenious businessman. He went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, graduated last in his class because he was a party boy, but the boy had a lot of smarts in business. The reason that this town of Mt Gretna came to exist was that all this land around that area was used for wood to make charcoal for the Cornwall furnace. And when, in the late 1870s, Coleman built 2 anthracite coal furnaces on the northwest side of Lebanon, and in 1883, Cornwall ceased operation, or was somewhere around 83. He had all this land and he wasn't producing. So he had to figure out how he's going to do this, what he's going to do with this to get some money out of it. First thing he did is he built this railroad, the Cornwall-Lebanon Railroad, from Lebanon to Cornwall to Chautauqua, north of Elizabethtown. And he knew what he was planning to do, but people thought he was crazy because he came to this little area, and he decided he's going to put a picnic grove in there and a station. And 2 of his men that were employees went out there, and they were going to go with Coleman and name these stations. And Coleman wasn't available when they went out, and they didn't name this one. A gentleman came home. His name was Hugh Maxwell, and he said, "We didn't name that picnic grove." And his wife said, "Well, why don't you name it Gretna?" I don't know if she came from Europe, where Gretna Green is in the United Kingdom, but she wanted Gretna. Well, they decided to put Mount before it, and that's how it's got its name. And after he built the park, people came on the trolley car or on the train from Elizabethtown over to the park and to Chautauqua, and also from Lebanon. Then he invited the National Guard to come there in 1885, and they took all the land from the lake all the way out into Colebrook. The cavalry was housed in Colebrook, and they used thousands of those acres, and he now had most of it income producing. You can see the bridge. This was a magnificent bridge that went across from the one side of the track to the other. This would, on the left side, would be the park side, and the other side was the side if you were going west to Elizabethtown. Another view of the station. The foundation of that station still exists. If you're on the rails to trails, you can see the foundation. There was a brick plant in Mt Gretna. It was also right along the rails to trails. As you can see on the left side, the railroad goes past it. And if you walk up the trail, you'll see a big pit where they got their ground to clay to make the bricks. Wasn't long lived because the bricks were no good. They were too soft. They used them for backer bricks, and they did employ a number of people there. Soon closed and was demolished. Now we're down in Colebrook where the cavalry was. You notice these houses don't have any porches on. A lot of them do today. And this was the Coleman Mansion. The original Robert Coleman that came over from Maryland built a furnace here in, oops, I'm hitting something I shouldn't be hitting. Built a furnace here, I think around 1809 or something. I have to get my dates back in order again. After a winter of not telling the story, you forget these things. That's Main Street in Colebrook. And there's the railroad station in Colebrook. This was the railroad station in Mt Gretna. The gentleman to the left, I think was Mr. Griner. He worked for the military as in their main office. And when the military shut down, he became the telegraph operator for the C&L Railroad. There's the ice house, ice and coal house. You will see to the left where there is a ramp. That's a conveyor belt. When they would cut the ice in blocks, take it up in that conveyor belt and stack it in that warehouse for the summer use. We're getting near to the end. I would, if any of you are interested, we have a little bit about the military. If you wish to stay for that, I wouldn't be at all upset if any of you want to leave, but while I'm here and some of you would like to see it, I'll show that too. This military encampment was extremely large. A lot of people don't realize how much land it took up and how large it was. Going up toward the timbers, there were about 10 or 15 mess halls there for the troops to eat. And many times in the earlier years, they all were in tents.
What years were they there?
They came in 1885, and in 1935, they started moving over to Indiantown Gap. I think it took several years till they moved the whole camp over there. Colonel Hicks was the man that was there year around. We are fortunate that his son kept a lot of the memorabilia. His son is almost 90 years old and has given us his uniforms, a lot of the maps, and a lot of the wonderful artifacts from the military. We have, if it wouldn't have been for that, we'd have practically nothing in the military. We have a lot of military pictures as well. Here's the band getting ready to support the troops in their marching. Here are the tents in lowered position. Here's Governor Stewart inspecting the troops. That happened every year. And each year the camp was named something different. The first camp was Camp Siegfried, and they're named after the different generals. Here's the cavalry, ready for inspection. Here's one of the reasons that they moved out of Mt Gretna. The rifle range and these babies fired right into Mt Gretna Borough. And people have gone up to Governor Dick and dug around on the way up and found shells that went over top of Chautauqua. As high-powered equipment came into vogue, they just had to get out of there. Here are the rookies coming in, getting their basic training. Here's the big boy, Major General Fred D. Grant. The headquarters of this whole encampment was where the Timbers Restaurant is today. Here's more of the artillery. these are the mess halls. This is Timber Road going up to the timbers, and you can see those mess halls lined up along there where the troops actually ate. To the left side is the soldiers' field. Now you talk about people complaining about cutting trees in Gretna. You probably read about that. Coleman had practically all of Gretna cut anyhow. So, but we do prize our trees. You better have a good reason for cutting a tree in Gretna. There's the rifle range, again firing in toward the borough. You can see in the middle of the picture the narrow gauge railroad coming out to pick up some of the troops and take them back into their camp. One of the reasons that the narrow gauge railroad is no longer in existence is that on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays, when people would go up to Governor Dick on that railroad, and they'd come back down and pick up some of the troops, if the cars were full, the soldiers would get on the running board. It's a narrow gauge railroad, only 24 inches wide, and they would rock this thing back and forth. And there were several accidents, one in which the car tipped over, and fortunately there was a tree there to catch it, but people didn't have seat belts, and so they fell out, and some people broke arms and so forth. And the railroad company in Lebanon decided, let's get rid of this liability, and they took the whole thing out. There's the bunkers for the rifle range. You can see them setting up the targets. If you travel out that way, you can still see this bunker. This building, as you may have read, is up at Indiantown Gap. They trucked it up there, and it sat there for years and years and years. And a couple of years ago, they restored it, and last year it was dedicated. I wish we were back in Gretna, but now here's the machine gun, also firing into Mt Gretna. Here's another view of the rifle range. See the targets. This rifle range, if you want to know the location of it, if you go out past the Mt Gretna sewer plant toward Colebrook, you come to a big bend in the road, and it's a lot of vacant space up the mountain there. That's where the rifle range was. They had a mess hall there. They had a mechanics shed there to repair equipment. And across the way along Route 117, there were a lot of brick buildings and that housed the old chain drive trucks that they had in later years. And that's the rifle range again. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. You showed us a picture of the conveyor belt on the ice.
Yeah.
What powered it?
Steam.
No kidding.
The old carousel organ that we have was also powered by steam. We call it a carousel organ, but actually it was a military band organ. If you didn't have a band, you could take that out in the field. That's why it's so loud. When we played it in a museum, it about deafens you. But they had a big wheel up at the top of the unit and a big belt that went down to the steam engine. And a lot of the equipment back then was powered by steam. much for inviting us. Enjoyed showing us. Hope you did.
So much, that was really interesting. I learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much.
Come visit our little museum.
Thank you for coming. And don't forget your brochure.
Right outside of the playhouse.
Oh, yeah.
The cottage.